Okay, yeah, let's get going with the usual bit of looking into the latest Siebel 23.7 update. I'll share my screen. And there we have it. Okay. So that works for you? Yes, just checking everything is working. Yeah. So yeah, I was quite pleasantly surprised to see these many updates in 23.7, including the long-standing updates on web tools, the predefined queries, favorites. There's a nice update to the layout editor, Applet layout editor, and there's a very interesting update on both the web tools side as well as the utility side for the repository upgrade, the CIF attribute differences view. So we'll talk about that. The REST API got an update. Now it's officially supporting CRUD operations. More on that later. And test automation also got an update. So it's, yeah, pretty chock full update package. And not stopping there, the MDE got an update and the migration application as well. And Tomcat as well. It's now on 9.074. So the predefined queries in web tools, I think everybody knows how predefined queries work, so no need to go into detail. So you will have a menu in web tools now. In the tools menu, actually, you can save your queries. There's a view, a dedicated view, by the way. It's not reusing the existing view. It's a dedicated web tools view to see the predefined queries. And there's a nifty little predefined query on itself on that new view to show only the web tools relevant PDQs. So hope this makes sense. And I found out actually can use it all over the place. For example, in the dashboard, the workspace dashboard, you can filter for, let me show that. So I think I just demonstrated that. So yeah, here I put in a PDQ, I just queried for edit in progress and saved it as a PDQ. And now I have editable workspaces as a selection. So it actually works. It works everywhere in web tools, seemingly.
That's great. I didn't even know it worked in here.
Yeah, which is nice. So
Alex, I tried to get that to work just like you did, and I couldn't get it to work. So congratulations.
Oh yeah, it's just run a query, like, you know,
yep.
Let's say
I think I was on a pre-release build, maybe, that
let's say delivered, and that will get me the delivered workspaces. Yeah. And now, well, let's see, queries, save query as. Oh, there you go. And
yeah, that makes sense.
You have it. Okay. And of course you can go.
Well, you probably want to do it by your username.
You can use your username or even dynamically, because, well, now you can go to the view.
Right. And modify it to be mine,
and modify it to even use the login name function or something right. Clever, you know, that.
Yep.
So it's there it is. You can modify it and of course make it public. All that PDQ stuff is
great.
just there. Yeah. And that's the all web tools PDQ that is seeded during the updates to filter only the PDQs relevant for web tools, which is a nice touch. Yeah. Okay, so the next feature I'm showing live is actually favorites. So there is a bookmark feature in Siebel tools that few people know about. And now a similar feature has made it into web tools officially. For a few releases, there was this menu item, but it didn't really work unless you did a repository upgrade. And now you don't require a repository upgrade. And you see add to favorites. So that's a business component, and any active record that you work on can now be added to favorites. It's a bit weird that it doesn't use the name here of the object. So found that, and I fixed it in devpops. There's a devpops version of it. Of course, I can change the name here. Now let's say Fave BC, and that's saved. And there's a view you can go to in the tools menu, and it shows your favorites. Now I have devpops on this environment, so it messes with the list applet a little bit, but not much. And of course, clicking on the link will take you there. Nice enough. Okay, so that's a quick navigation, if there is any. And if you have the devpops, I will introduce devpops 23.7 shortly. You have now in WebTools a right-click menu or a context menu, so you can right-click any record. And I have added a Add to Favorites button here, and that also inserts the correct name. You can just save it. And there's big favorites icon now through devpops. So that's not standard functionality. So you can right-click and go to the favorites list. Yeah, so you can definitely play around with that. And it's very useful because you have these objects that you often work with, and now there's a single page or view where you can find these objects and navigate quickly, don't have to query, etc. So that's favorites. And then that I won't show, but it's the screenshots speak for themselves. There's a new icon in the toolbar of the Applet web template editor, or the Applet layout editor in WebTools. It's called Set Tab Order, and then the layout editor canvas kind of flips or changes the mood. Now you can no longer drag and drop stuff, but you can click each individual control in a certain order, like 1, 2, 3, 4. And that order will be saved as the HTML sequence, which then the user can use in the browser at runtime with the tab key. So that's the tab order. And now that feature has arrived in WebTools. There's a save or cancel. So you switch into that mode of the editor, and you save your changes or you just cancel. All right. Also nice to see. And the final addition to WebTools is a view which is reachable from the archive menu and is called CIF attribute differences. Now, CIF is of course the archive files that you import. And so it's interesting to see that there are basically two use cases for this view. And the biggest use case, I think the driving use case, is the repository upgrade, which actually does a CIF import. It does not one, but dozens of files, depending on your gap, on your version gap. And so it imports that using siebdev CLI, the command line. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Brian, siebdev CLI has been updated to actually write during the merge operation, or whatever service is behind that. It's not, I'm not privy to that, but it writes to tables. Let me just.
That's right, it does.
Bring that to the front. So those tables are inserted by the post-install database update. And the two tables on the bottom are new. There's an SRTC sub-object, which is on the object level, and an attribute or property level table, a child table, obviously. And that is linked to the modified objects and user. So the modified object is an existing table that is populated when you change things in workspaces already, so modified object. So these two tables on the bottom are new, and the new view, I have a screenshot here, and I have a full video out on this repository feature, so you can see it in action. So the view has a tree applet where you can see each component and each, if you open, expand, you can see each attribute, aka property, and you can see the pre-existing value, the value that was there, and the imported value that came in through the ZIF file. So when you do the repository upgrade now in 23.7 and higher, it does not actually deliver this development workspace anymore. It just stops. The workspace stays editable. There's a message displayed even on the command line for a repository upgrade that you should go to that view and resolve any conflicts. So the conflicts, of course, are, let's get one further. The conflicts are for customer modified standard objects. We have discussed this in great detail in some Siebel Fridays before this. So whenever you have modified a standard object, like for example, this workflow, very notorious SISOM modified products and services process. Here's just a sample modification, right? With adding a custom business service, or rewiring it, or editing a standard step. So that'll be some example changes. Of course, you have plenty of changes in a standard workflow sometimes, and then the outcome is not really desirable, because that standard connector is still pointing to the original step, and the changes in the standard step have been lost. And of course, a lot of standard steps have been added. So it's hard actually to visualize this without taking screenshots like I did, side by side. So there's no visualization. I'm not sure if that's maybe planned for complex objects like workflows.
Alex, if I may insert something here, and Carrie, maybe you can comment as well, but I think it's important to note repository upgrade is not doing what you're showing, because your database will not have a prior standard in it. So during an upgrade or IRM, we're able to compare prior standard.
Yeah. I'm showing it. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm showing it like it would be a IRM or upgrade with 4 repositories. It's not that. It's just 4, right. But it's 4 versions of the same object. There's a version.
Right, but for repository upgrade, there's only 3 versions. We don't know what the prior standard was during repository, because it's nowhere in the data.
You don't know, but the customer.
Right.
If the customer hasn't touched it, it looks like the prior standard.
But yes, you're right. If they haven't touched it. But like if they haven't touched it and that's main 0, or whatever. But anyway, the other thing is that what this feature does goes beyond conflicts. If you could go back to the slide 45, I think.
Yeah.
So a conflict only occurs when we can see that the customer changed something.
When you have three different values, right?
Right. And so, well, no, that's what's weird. It's really only 2 different values. Because has it been changed since main 0 by the customer? Yes or no? And then has it been, and then are we changing it? Yes or no?
Right.
So there's a couple of problems. So we're not actually, so that would be a conflict. We can see that both people have changed it, that the customer changed it and we changed it.
Let's call this a real conflict or a physical conflict, right?
Right. So that's an actual definite conflict.
Yeah.
And so those have always been flagged when you do the rebase.
Right.
But what we found is a couple of things. One, let's say we changed something that the customer had never changed, but they were happy with it.
Right.
So, in this particular case, if the value was refresh activities and that's all they wanted, they didn't want refresh, copy, whatever that's, that would not have shown up during a rebase. Because a rebase would, a repository upgrade is exactly like the customer did their own changes.
In training, I call this a conflict of interest.
Yes, I think that's a good point. But anyway, it's not purely a conflict. It's just a change. And it's no different than if one of your own developers as a customer made a change in a branch and then checked it in. We wouldn't call that or delivered it. We wouldn't call that a conflict. They just changed it.
It's an
right?
update, yeah.
Yeah. And so, the engine has no way to know that this particular type of situation wasn't just desirable. And so we had a number of complaints about this. And that's why we added this. The other scenario we found is that if somebody flattens, then every change they made previously, we won't know about it anymore. It's gone.
Yeah.
So their main zero, we won't even know it's a conflict. So there's a couple scenarios, but this allows you to actually look and see it every single change that happened. So if you're a financial services customer, you don't have to look at clinical subject and LS clinical, skip over those. Those are things you don't care about.
Yeah.
But things you might care about, like OFS service region or something.
I recommend customers are often overwhelmed by the sheer number of objects,
Right.
like they are in the hundreds.
Yeah.
And they say, oh wow, this is too complicated. Let's not do repository upgrade this time. Let's postpone it. And it just gets worse, right?
Which just makes it worse.
Yeah. And so I encourage customers to export the list. You can export it from the workspace dashboard if you want, or SQL.
Right.
Export the list and ignore the inserts, because that's this new stuff added by Oracle. Right? You can safely ignore those. You could not have changed them, right? You could not have touched them because.
We did have one case for that happen.
Yeah, but if it's a really new object, like a brand new applet.
No, it was a brand new object. They happened to have one with the same name.
Oh, okay, bad luck.
but it's unlikely. It's unlikely.
Yeah, okay. And then go through the updated objects and use naming conventions, like you said. Your FINS customers or LS is not for you, right? Or field service or whatever. So you can use the naming convention and trim it down. And then you probably hopefully you have a list of things that you really modified. So the developers know they're at the applets and workflows they work on a regular basis. So you can still filter that list. And at one customer, we came down from 500 of objects. If the full repository upgrade, that's now 1,000 objects, I think, if you've never done one. And we trimmed that down to 15 objects that they would really need to worry about. And manually, the workflows, you still have to go in manually. I know that you now have the keep pre-existing value flag, which is when on delivery, the pre-existing value will be kept, which is great. But for a complex workflow, we did a lot of stuff that just doesn't cut it, I think. So you still have to manually go into the workflow editor and fix the workflow back, right?
We do have a backlog item to address that, which is to treat workflows as an entire entity.
Right. Yeah. So the layout stuff, and it gets
take,
very
take ours or
complicated.
take yours, and then you'll have to manually look at how to merge the changes together. But to treat them as a single entity instead of treating each branch as a potential conflict, because as your picture illustrated, that doesn't work out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. So that's the point of this picture, is that still, well, if you check the flags, I tried it. I checked the flag for the connector, and it was connected back to where I wanted it. So that from count selected rows to get all asset list, that was the connector I modified in the customization. And using the flag, actually on the layout plus the endpoint, it was basically how do you say, preserved, right? But the changes that are made on the input property level on an existing step that were hard to merge. So there might be a manual step, but still, the new view is really great for customers to, well, convince themselves, okay, this is not bad at all, and it probably helps them get through the repository upgrade much faster. Okay, and yeah, the second use case is actually any arbitrary CIF import using SiebDev CLI. So if you use SiebDev CLI for a batch import, it will still write to those same tables, and you can and on that developer workspace, you can still use that view. You can open it and analyze before you deliver. So that, because in the manual CIF import, you already have that tree view with the preview what will happen, right? But in SiebDev CLI, you now have a, let's say, post-import chance to check your imports. Okay. Right, then, yeah, the next big construction site, if you will, is the REST API, which gets a lot of updates, like on a regular basis, every month or so, or every 2 or 3 months, there's a major feature coming into the REST API. And this time it's CRUD operations. So that's create, read, update, delete. And I'm not a native English speaker, but I get that CRUD in some areas is a word that sounds negative. Is that so?
No, it's just for create, read, update, and delete. But yes, it is a.
If you say CRUD, you
CRUD
mean
is
like garbage.
it's a negative thing.
Yeah. So one company, I worked with their product in the CRM space. They use CRED, C-R-E-D, create, read, edit, delete. So yeah, they're a bit shy and uptight here. Okay. I also heard CRUD operation sounds a little bit tastier. Okay. Joking aside, in 23.7 and higher, you can now officially do CRUD operations on hierarchical data, especially queries, which was not possible before, to return a parent or multiple parents with their child and grandchild records in a single request. And in the create and update and also delete area, there was a possibility to do it in prior versions, but it was not documented. And you actually had to work with the well, let's call it the integration object structure, the list of thingy. So I'll show some examples. So the query is really something. There's a let's say well, says here get children all option, or a query parameter. You put that in the URL in your GET request, and that will, well, as it says on the tin, it will get all the children. So we'll go the entire integration object hierarchy. So any integration object that's used for that particular business object, we go down the hierarchy. If there's any instance of a record, it will, well, put it in the output. So the output could be potentially really huge if that's a customer with 100 orders and you have each order has 100 line items or whatever. So that could be really huge. So here this example here shows an account and its organizations, the associate, that's an MVG exposed by the integration object, the business address. Then you see the first contact. You see, actually, it's an array it returns, even if there's just one. And then there's the fields of the first contact and probably there's a contact business address visible here. Yeah. So, but that gives you all. I tried to enter, instead of all, a business component name. Didn't actually do anything. So I don't think that's a feature that's planned, because there's a second one, a second query parameter called query hierarchy, where you have a finer grain, where you can actually specify. And I think that's Nick's question in the chat. Is there a way to get the data for an object that's not in the list? Or, well, let me just explain that. So the query hierarchy parameter takes a JSON string. So that's a JSON string you put together. So you specify, for example, I want the account business component and I want these fields and I want it to be filtered using that search spec. You can also add a sort spec. And then I just want contact and I just want first and last name. So keeping it short, for example. And as you can see in the output, that does exactly what you want. And you only get what you request. So that's a very nice feature, and that has never been possible before in the REST API. So the queries on the data API definitely have a lot more power here. And speaking of upserting, or that is insert or update, I use put a lot because it's upserting. Post you can use for insert. The example on the left is 23.6 and earlier. It still works. Was not documented, but if you know how integration objects work, you can add a list of contact element or a list of child business component, and then an array of child business components, and it actually would act on the hierarchy. It would. This is an update. As you can see, I'm using row IDs that exist. But if you use a dummy row ID, it will insert all 3 records. And likewise do updates on those if you use if you use any usable key that is exposed in the integration object. And in 23.7 and higher, now you have a natural, let's say, hierarchy. You don't have to use the list of contact container. Or list of container. You just specify, okay, this is now a contact and this is an array of child records and their children likewise. Checking just the chat. Carrie says you can use search expression using wildcards. Yes, of course. That's not a question, it's a statement.
I was replying to Nick's
okay.
question.
Yeah, I see. Right. And the delete operation also is the delete operation is also, it's actually documented in older bookshelf guides. It's quite interesting. I never really worked much with deleting multiple objects. So you can, usually you pass a row ID as a part of the URL. But if you have multiple, you pass in an array of IDs, and you can pass an array of IDs of child records. It has to be the ID, the row ID for delete always. And now this is already documented. So the interesting part is that when you have the primary is not deleted actually, or I couldn't find anything about if you want to delete the primary and the children, you have to do a 2-pass delete. So delete the children first, or rely on the link if it's, has a delete property, cascade delete, and then pass in just the IDs of the primaries you want to delete. You notice there's an operation called skip node. It's returned, so indicating I interpret this as the account has been skipped, right? So there are a bunch of questions in the chat. So Rajesh asked, by removing list of integration component, how is it working? And Carrie answered, yes, you map it in the application because it's an array. The list of implies. Okay. And Rajesh asks, is it applicable while calling a workflow business service as well via REST inbound call? Not sure, maybe you can, somebody can answer that. This is just the inbound REST API for data, for business objects.
Yeah, I'm not sure how the workflow and business services apply here. I'm not sure what the question is.
Or
maybe
Rajesh.
I'll ask a question. Let's say if I would like to, let's say if I'm exposing a workflow as an inbound REST service, where my workflow takes an input of account hierarchy, like account address and contact. So there also, if you, let's say, generate a Swagger out of it, it generates a list of every time. And, there's a real pain. All the external systems ask, why do you need list of?
Okay.
It's a decade-old question. So is it being removed even during workflow? Let's say if I expose an IO in my workflow as an input, so will it be removed there as well now in 23.7?
That's a good question. I don't know the answer, but I think the answer would be no.
I agree, because I just recently worked on a workflow in with exactly that. So you pass in an integration object instance, a Siebel message with an attachment, and you have. I haven't tested it actually without the list off, but I'm pretty sure Carrie is on the right side, that because this is just sounds like it's a specific change for the data REST, for the inbound data REST API. So if, of course, you use workflow and business service because you want to do something with the data, something that the data API can't do, right? But
right. Because the most useful one is BS and workflow.
that's a business service, you mean?
Yes. BS. I mean.
Yeah, business. Yeah, of course. With I have a video on YouTube where I bring up the 2 decades old ASIs, the specialized business services that work so well with integration objects, and they're still around, and so you can use them in a workflow or just as a regular business service. Okay, but we're digressing from the new features. So Nick has had a question that Carrie has picked up. So, okay, just keeping track with the chat. Okay, so the REST API definitely got some features, and let's not forget the test automation area, where there's really a lot going on. So a lot of small features, but very interesting ones. If you're using the test automation with Siebel, that is, of course, the Siebel test automation, then you would probably have a nice surprise with 23.7. The most striking feature is the possibility to add a condition field. It has to have that name in your data sets. Now, data set you might not be familiar with if you're not using test automation. Data sets have been introduced 20.9, I think. So they're around for quite some time. Using, for example, a CSV file you can import as a data set, and using that data for iterations in your test. And now the condition fields allows you, well, to specify a condition to use a specific record or not in that specific iteration. One use case, for example, is to define the environment as a variable, like this is def, this is sit, this is UAT. But it can be anything that can be expressed in the test automation specific syntax of variables with at. Can be complex expressions. And if that condition evaluates to true or is empty, the record is actually used. And if the expression evaluates to false, the record is skipped. So very nice feature there. And I've done a prototype with a customer, and we just used the unit test because they were not ready for batch testing. And we struggled with adding the parameter in that environment parameter. So I know you can add it in the test script, but we wanted to have it globally. And then finally got around, okay, there's a parameter list in the unit config XML, right? There's a similar parameter list in the test execution view, a list applet actually. So you can add those hard parameters that have an initial value. You can add them here. And that worked out quite well. And those data sets you can traditionally associate with individual test scripts, and now you can associate them with a test set. So a set of scripts, and each and every script in the set will then use that, let's say, parent data set, even if it has one associated already. So a more global approach. You can deep copy a test set, so copy it with all the associations, with all the associated test scripts and data sets. There are 2 new views to see the master suites for a test set and the test sets for a data set. And there is on the automated or batch testing part in the test execution, there are 2 changes. The first one is a notify flag. So you check that flag, you can see it here in the screenshot. And thanks to an action set and runtime event that is seeded during post-install database setup, any change to the status field, status is it shown here? It's actually not shown. Okay, but there's a status field on the test execution, which is updated by Jenkins, for example, and then you can see it here. You get a message broadcast notification when the status of a test execution record changes. Nice touch. And the second new field, now you see the status field in this screenshot as well. The second field is run reference, where you can add a label. A Jenkins label can be used to group nodes, machines that you use, or a single machine. And that will ensure that this test execution is only executed on machines matching the same labels, or machines that have labels matching this value. This requires, by the way, the HPI, the Hudson plugin for Jenkins, to be uploaded again. So the new version, because there's a new same parameter now on Jenkins side as well. Okay, so wow, that's quite a lot to tell. So 23.7 is really a big update. And the MDE, the installer that brings your Siebel to 23.7, now has a new flag, either in the response file or in the user interface. And that is called restart services. And that actually, there's an explanation there what this means. If you check the flag, which is the default state, the services, that means any Tomcat or Siebel server gateway on the very machine you run this on will be started, which has been the behavior of MDE, at least on Windows. Actually, it started prematurely. The post-install database was kicked off, and at the same time, the Siebel server was started, which was, of course, too early because you want post-install database setup to be finished before you restart the services. Now that all works by checking the flag, and the services are started or not.
Alex, if I may, what should happen, and unfortunately this is a screenshot, so you can't check, on the database parameters tab immediately before it, if you elect to defer post-install DB setup, then this should always be unchecked when you get to it, and in fact grayed out.
Okay.
Because post-install DB setup is a requirement. Now, if you choose skip it, the only time you should ever choose skip it is if you have already run it.
You're right.
On a previous Siebel server, and then it will default to on, you know, as well, and it'll default to on if you said run it in line. But if you say defer it, it shouldn't be checked.
Okay, that's interesting. Thanks very much, Brian, for filling this in. Yeah.
And also, you're right. The important one of the most key parts is this was like my personal thing that I kept telling them, you have to fix this, because and Alex, you've had to show me this too, but I mean, it drives me nuts as well, is that it was starting post-install DB setup in parallel, which is with
the Siebel server, and the Siebel server encounters a database that is not yet ready. And
right, exactly.
Yeah.
And
so
it doesn't upright anyway, and it kills performance because it's trying to run. You're doing it on the same box, so it's just
right. It was not right, and now it is right, and that's good. Okay, so sometimes
also I'll give you a related preview, and Alex, again, I think you're the one that pointed this out to me. In a future release, a soon future release, we're also going to make sure to preserve the Java memory things.
Oh yeah. I didn't dare to ask.
Services.
Yeah, the memory
that's
settings.
Coming soon as well.
Okay, it will preserve the memory settings. Just have to repeat that, yeah, because I'm so excited. On the Tomcat containers, right?
Yeah, I mean, that was, because I honestly had the same issue. Why did it get slow every time I run?
Yeah, it's a big, and it's actually a lot of work for some, for administrators I know. They have 35 Siebel servers.
Yeah,
and that's
it's not Yeah, I don't even know. I mean, maybe you can do it from the command. You probably can do it from the command line, but I don't know how. I always have to go into the
You have
property.
you have to go in manually and set the memory back to what it was before. So you have to, if you have
For the
different
Java.
settings on different servers, you have
Yeah.
to, yeah. So yeah, that's good to hear that this is taken care
That's
of as
coming.
well. Yeah, coming quote soon.
Quote
Okay.
soon.
And I think that's the final enhancement that is documented bookshelf is a new flag on the execution details in the migration application when you have schema related stuff to be imported. And we all know there is this password to be entered for the database schema owner on the target side. And the password was clear text until 23.6. And that's, of course, a security risk on both sides of the database. The DBA doesn't want administrators to know that password because it's a database owner, the table owner, or schema owner. And you also don't want to kind of have this password to be passed around. So,
Well, it was, I mean, it wasn't being passed in clear text because it's an HTTPS connection.
right, but I mean, with
It's
passed,
more
I mean,
about the DBA concern of sharing the table owner
people
password.
copy pasting it in Slack and whatnot.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So this way, the DBA can give you a pre-encrypted one, which means that you can use it here, and then on the other side, we decrypt it before we talk to the database.
Right.
So, which kind of solves the problem.
and the encryption must be done with the encrypt string utility that is found on the Siebel server.
Right. Otherwise, we can't encrypt it.
Yeah, right. And on the user interface, you have a flag. And if you use the REST API, there's a new argument mentioned here, PWD, password pre-encrypted, set it to true, and pass the password, which I'm reading from bookshelf. It can be either base 64 encoded, but that's like always has been the case.
Yeah, no. You don't set it to base 64 encoded. That's always been the case.
Yeah,
that's if you don't want to use the feature, you just use it the way you've always used it.
Plain text in the REST API means base 64.
Yes.
And encrypt
right,
now.
But you still don't enter it as base 64. You would enter the real password.
No, speaking of the REST API, if you make a REST call.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, when you make a REST call, you had to already encode it in base 64.
Okay.
Right. So that's the way it's always been. That hasn't changed.
Yeah.
But if you want to use the new feature, you add the new attribute and then use the encrypted password.
And the way we did this was intentionally such that if you have existing scripts, it's not going to break.
Right. Yeah, it's still backward compatible.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that is really a handful, and kudos to the team on the Oracle side. So that is.
It was mostly Carrie, so.
Yeah, that's
good work.
There was a big one, and yeah, there's some cheers on the chat as well. I can see Nick saying awesome release. Yeah, thanks, Nick. So yeah, we are on Zoom, so you can clap your hands and all this. Okay. And yeah, before we go to the next topic, which is the devpops update, just one thing for the European side of the audience, or anybody who wants to visit Europe in October and November. It's a great season, not too hot.
I certainly want to. I want that to be clear.
Brian wants to. Okay, here, please listen. Oracle management, whoever watches.
Yeah,
Brian
absolutely
needs to come.
want to make that happen.
Yeah. Unfortunately, Brian, the Munich event has been put after Oktoberfest.
Yeah, I was a little disappointed. It was originally the very end of September.
Because to be fair, having worked in Munich for 12 years, during Oktoberfest, you can't do any events of that nature because people would be absolutely wasted and useless.
Yeah.
So we did core consultant course. We did core consultant courses back in the day during Oktoberfest, and there was a nightmare. Hungover, stinking of beer. Okay, stopping. So yeah, what's this all about? Applications Unlimited Days it happened last year too. There was a series of events in similar cities, especially Paris, I remember. And the Oracle team, the Applications Unlimited team is organizing this. And Applications Unlimited, of course, includes Siebel CRM among the notable eBusiness Suite, Hyperion, JD Edwards, PeopleSoft. And there's a track for every, let's say, application, including, of course, Siebel. You see the link here on the slide. I'll pass it on in the chat, and I will put it in the description of the recorded video on YouTube. So let me put that in the chat. The link is to the Oracle registration page. So if you want to register, please make sure you do. And we will be ringing that bell throughout any video and post on the Siebel Hub. The Siebel Hub team will be there, so Richard and myself, in most locations. So on every location, we'll have at least one Siebel Hub team member, so we can meet in person, and we can have a chat or talk about training opportunities for Siebel CRM. So we'd be happy to see you there. All right. Next thing on my list is well, I already showed off a little bit of the features for the new version of devpops. Well, let me go to devpops first. If you are regular on Siebel Fridays, you know the GitHub repository that I keep, devpops, the extension that is a just educational exercise, not to be used in any mission critical environment, but still demonstrates a lot of open UI things you can do. And the 23.7.1, so that is released, actually has support for Siebel 23.7, of course, earlier, but there's a few. I would like to come back on that CIF attribute differences in a little while. The dependency finder I demonstrated last time has been enhanced still, so now supports more queries and has a few more features. So that's the two major things. And if you look at the feature list down here, it's growing list. So yeah, I already showed that list applet right-click menu in Web Tools, which is tied in. So let me show that again on a business component. Let's run a query here. Right, so depending on the type, you always have about record, obviously, which is just an exercise in showing what can be done. You have the favorites. If it's a scriptable object, you can go to the script editor, and if the dependency finder supports the object, you can open the dependency finder right from here, and it kicks off a search. And that's one of the features in dependency finder. There's a hide zero hits button, so you just get the filtered view. And it was just one applet and one business object component for this one, so it's a small one. So that has been integrated, and that view. Let me go back to the presentation where that view we talked about extensively. The new, here it is again. The new view in Web Tools to show everything that SiebDev CLI has imported and is only available before you actually deliver the workspace. So the workspace has to be editable for this view to, or the link or the command to be active. So you can go to this view in Web Tools. And the first thing when I saw this view, and I was thinking of my customer who still has to undergo the repository upgrade, and they start from 20.3, right? So I did a repository upgrade, including everything from 20.3, and you get a lot of things you have to actually expand, and you know, you have to drill down, or how do you say that? You have to keep expanding the tree to get to the valley to see everything. So, and that customer immediately says, what if we can have a list of things, right? Something to export. And knowing that there are two tables, right? There are tables populated. You can build a few. I build a business component, applets, a few on top of these tables with a few joins. So now I have a flat view on the object attribute level or on the property level. And that view looks like this, and it's included in devpops as a CIF file. So if you want to, that's the same information you see in that tree view in WebTools. It's accessible anytime. Of course, it's fully read-only. You're not supposed to change anything here. But you can query, you can sort. First time in 12 years I worked with icon maps. So this object has been updated. It has a new child object. So you can say this control in the applet is a new control. There's an object that has been deactivated. So some things are highlighted. There's a new object, a new applet, you know, those you can ignore, especially the WebTools stuff. It doesn't hurt. And of course, you can query and search and sort and then do the regular Siebel export as you do. That's probably too much now, but let me just kick it off. That looks weird. Why does it look so weird? Okay. HTML is and it's an awful lot of records when you do a full repository upgrade. I call it a full repository upgrade if you have never done one. That's 20.3 to 23.7. Now that's like 3 years and 4 months worth of CIF files being imported. So you see it's counting up to 30,000 and it's still exported. I think it's I don't know, 200,000 rows or something like that. That's pretty big HTML. So maybe I should have done a query first. But
a lot of that's probably workflows, because each one has a zillion child components, because every branch, every condition, all those things are a separate record.
Oh, it looks like I had it filtered. It's already 56,000. So okay.
Yeah, I know.
So,
I'm just that's why it's probably so slow.
Yeah, but still, you get an HTML or CSV out of there, and of course, then you can better analyze and open it in Excel and better analyze that and prepare for the work ahead. The minor work, I always try to convince the customers. It's a few objects. Yes, you have modified this order management workflow, and that's unfortunate. And Oracle modified as well. Look at the changes made by Oracle and probably merge it manually. It will take 1 or 2 days for a workflow, right? And you have 3 workflows. Okay, that's 1 person week. Is still significant, and the customers don't like to hear that, 1 person week, but it's manageable. My personal opinion, it's manageable. So, and with that view that is available as a CIF file on an as-is basis, so it's a completely read-only view on top of these tables. Maybe it helps and helps customers get through the repository upgrade even easier. So that's my little contribution there. All right. So I think that's all I wanted to say. Just so the microphones are open, so or the chat is open, if there's anything from your side. Yeah, hello.
Yeah, Alex, I have a general query to maybe carry in this forum. Basically, it seems to be a very common thing, which I think this is again with respect to REST APIs. Maybe Carrie, it is a question to you as well as Alex, if you have some inputs there. So whenever we get a Swagger from external system, let's say any standard Swagger, it will have 200, 400, 500. It's a common standard Swagger. So when we import into Siebel tools, it creates multiple IOs as a response IO. And let's say in a workflow, if I'm triggering a REST outbound call, the current scenario is we do not know whether it is a 200, whether it is a success or is a failure, unless we have to manually traverse every IO. So are we expecting a fix around it where we can directly know first whether it is what is the HTTP code, whether it is success or failure? Hope I'm able to give a right explanation around it.
I have one question immediately is, when you say you're importing it into Siebel tools, do you mean Siebel tools or web tools?
Yeah, web tools. You
Okay,
can
all
imagine
right.
a web tools. Yeah. I mean,
So-
in whichever scenario, yeah.
You're sending out an outbound REST request, and are you saying that how can you get the response status from the external system in its response?
Yes, no, yeah, Gary. So what I'm trying to say, the output of proxy BS should have an output called HTTP status code, so that then and there itself, we will know, okay, if it is 200, let's proceed, else throw it an error, something like that. The current scenario, we do not have that. We have to traverse every IO, because let's say we have 200, 400, 401, 403. So we have to traverse each IO. That's the very complex thing which is happening.
Well, in the filter service, in the request, or the filter service for the response, you should be able to get the status code from there directly. So the filter service is something that you would write, of course, but you should just have to look at the overall response. It has a status, and you should be able to get that. Are you saying you can in that filter service?
Yeah, it's becoming a custom, but what I'm trying to say, we could have, let's say if I trigger a request in Postman, I will be seeing in the bottom the status code.
Yeah.
So I think we should introduce an output argument called HTTP status code, something out of the proxy where we can easily get to know.
I would support that as well. It's pretty hard to see is it a 200, is it a 404, is it a 500? That should be really like a global on the first
output
level of
argument.
property set.
Oh yeah.
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 Something
Definitely.
like that.
Okay, so
Yeah.
I thought I had seen somewhere where you can do that, and it's supposedly easy, but could you, obviously it's not, could you send me something and I will look into it?
Yeah. I mean, maybe Alex, I'll reach out to you in email so that I can get Carrie email. Carrie, actually, we have raised an Oracle support SR, and they have confirmed there's no other way other than traversing every IO and see whether it's a 200, 401, 403. It's
There's
very
already an
complex.
SR for it. Yeah.
Do you have the SR number? I'll look at it now and I'll
sure.
talk to engineering.
Maybe it's not handy with me, but
Okay.
I can share it with Alex soon.
I'll happy to relay it to Carrie, or Carrie, if you don't mind,
yeah, could you please share me your
email address?
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah,
I'm putting it in the chat right now.
It's very, very useful, Carrie, and it is one of the needed feature actually.
Yeah. Okay. Terrific. If we can't do it, then I am glad to know that we need it.
Carrie, you're sending to me. Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Can I send again to everyone?
Yeah. Hold on. There you go.
Okay. Thanks much, Carrie. Much appreciated for your help.
Yep.
Yes, Carrie. Thanks a lot. I'll drop a note.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, that was an action-packed Siebel Friday. So lots of things to explore in 23.7, and yeah, it would be nice to see you again in 1 month from now with 23.8. So yeah, leaves me with wish you a happy remaining day, evening, and weekend, and take care. And bye-bye. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Alex. Thanks all.
Bye.
Bye. Have a nice evening.
Hey, Alex, do you have a minute?
Yeah, sure. Let me just stop the recording.
you.